I bet you didn't know this. We live in a world saturated with information. Every day we're bombarded with news, opinions, and narratives vying for our attention. It's easy to dismiss anything that sounds even remotely out there as the ramblings of conspiracy theorists. But what if I told you that some of the most unbelievable conspiracies turned out to be completely true? For decades, they were dismissed as paranoid fantasies, the stuff of late-night radio and fringe publications. But what if these theories weren't just wild speculation? What if the whispers of government cover-ups, secret experiments, and manipulations were rooted in reality? They say the truth is stranger than fiction. Well, get ready to jump down the rabbit hole because we're about to unravel 3 chilling conspiracy theories that turned out to be 100% true. Are you shocked to learn what your government is capable of? This one is about as far from a victimless crime as you can get. It's the story of the Tuskegee syphilis study, a 40-year experiment conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service on unsuspecting African-American men in Macon County, Alabama, from 1932 to 1972. We're talking about the government, your government, experimenting on its own citizens. Now, I'm all for scientific advancement, but not when it comes at the cost of human life and dignity. These men were promised free healthcare, which, let's be honest, in those times, particularly for a poor, predominantly black community, was a godsend. But here's the kicker. They weren't told they were part of a study, let alone one about syphilis. They were told they were being treated for bad blood, a catch-all term for various ailments back then. But the truth? They were injected with syphilis. And to make matters worse, they were denied treatment, even when penicillin became widely available in the 1940s as an effective cure. Can you imagine that? Knowing there's a cure out there, but being denied it? The researchers, and this is the part that really gets me, wanted to study the natural progression of the disease. They wanted to see what syphilis would do to the human body, untreated, unhindered. So, for 40 years, these men lived with the debilitating effects of syphilis. Heart disease, blindness, mental deterioration, you name it. Many died, some passed the disease on to their wives, and innocent children were born with congenital syphilis. This wasn't some rogue operation either. This was the U.S. government, hiding behind the guise of science, perpetrating a horrifying injustice on its own people. The Tuskegee study wasn't just unethical, it was downright criminal. It wasn't until 1972, when the story finally broke in the Washington Star, that the public outcry forced the government to shut the whole thing down. Think about that timeline, 1932 to 1972. 4 decades of deceit, of playing God with people's lives. The government finally apologized in 1997, but the damage was done. The Tuskegee syphilis study remains a dark stain on the fabric of American history, a chilling reminder that even the most powerful institutions can betray the public's trust in the name of some twisted, perverse idea of progress. This wasn't just about medical malpractice. It was about racial injustice. It was about preying on a vulnerable population and exploiting their trust for something as cold and calculated as a scientific study. This event, as much as we may want to forget it, should forever be seared in our collective memory. It's a stark reminder that blind trust in authority can have devastating consequences. We need to be vigilant, to question, to demand transparency, because who knows what's going on behind closed doors right under our noses. We have to remember to never forget, because those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And that, my friends, is a terrifying thought. So always question the information you receive. Seek out multiple sources. Critical thinking is essential in understanding complex issues. Don't just accept what you're told. Dig deeper, ask questions, and form your own informed opinions. Why are there not more people talking about mind control in the CIA? Let's count down to the truth. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This next one is like something straight out of a science fiction thriller, but I assure you it's all too real. This is the story of Project MKUltra, the CIA's foray into mind control and chemical interrogation. Buckle up, because this one gets weird. We're talking 1950s, Cold War paranoia at its peak. The CIA, convinced that the Soviets, Chinese, and North Koreans were way ahead in mind control techniques, decided to launch their own top-secret program. They called it MKUltra. Now, the CIA's official line was that MKUltra was all about developing truth serums and mind control techniques for interrogation purposes, to get a leg up on the enemy. But the truth, as always, is a bit more complicated and a lot more disturbing. We're talking about unsuspecting subjects, from soldiers to civilians, even patients in mental institutions, being dosed with LSD, other hallucinogens, and a cocktail of experimental drugs without their knowledge or consent. Imagine being experimented on, your mind poked and prodded without even knowing it. But it wasn't just drugs. The CIA also used hypnosis, electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation, and even sexual abuse as part of their mind control experiments. The goal? To break down a person's personality, their sense of self, and rebuild them as something, more malleable, more controllable. These experiments had devastating consequences. Some subjects suffered psychotic breaks, developed severe mental health issues, and some, tragically, even died. And the worst part, much of the program's documentation was destroyed in 1973 under the orders of then CIA Director Richard Helms. So, we'll never know the full extent of MKUltra's activities, the true scope of the horrors that unfolded in those clandestine labs. But what we do know paints a chilling picture of government overreach and a blatant disregard for human rights. MKUltra wasn't just about winning the Cold War, it was about power. It was about the intoxicating allure of controlling the human mind, of turning individuals into puppets. And that's a scary thought, my friends. Think about it. A government agency experimenting on its own citizens, using them as guinea pigs in a twisted game of mind control. It's a breach of trust on a fundamental level, one that should give us all pause. The revelations about MKUltra sent shockwaves through the nation, forcing the government to implement stricter regulations and oversight. But the question remains, how can we be sure something like this isn't happening again, right now, under a different name, in a different lab? MKUltra is a stark reminder that the pursuit of power, especially when shrouded in secrecy, can lead to unimaginable horrors. It's a reminder to stay vigilant, to question authority, and to never take our freedoms for granted. Because who knows what lurks in the shadows, waiting for its chance to control our minds. Always question the motives behind the information presented to you, and do your own research. Stay skeptical, stay informed, and most importantly, remember the victims of these experiments. They were our fellow citizens, subjected to unimaginable horrors. Show empathy, and let their suffering remind us to protect each other from such abuses of power. Are you ready to uncover the most shocking government conspiracy ever conceived? We're talking about a plan so audacious, so morally bankrupt, that it sounds like something out of a bad spy movie. But I assure you, this is all too real. This is Operation Northwoods, the Pentagon's plan to stage terrorist attacks on American soil to justify a war with Cuba. It's 1962, the height of the Cold War. The United States is locked in a tense standoff with Cuba, and the Kennedy administration is looking for a way to oust Fidel Castro. Enter Operation Northwoods, a plan so outlandish, so morally reprehensible, that it's hard to believe it ever made it past the drawing board. This wasn't some rogue operation. This was a plan devised by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officers in the United States. It was a plan to essentially wage war on its own citizens, all in the name of manufacturing consent for a foreign invasion. The plan called for a series of false flag operations, staged terrorist attacks that would be blamed on Cuba, giving the United States the justification it needed to invade. We're talking about sinking boats full of Cuban refugees, hijacking planes, even simulating attacks on the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay. They even considered staging a fake terrorist attack in Miami, complete with casualties, to really stir up public outrage. Imagine that, your government faking a terrorist attack, killing its own citizens to justify a war. It's the stuff of nightmares, but it almost happened. Thankfully, President Kennedy, to his credit, rejected the plan outright. He saw it for what it was, a dangerous and morally reprehensible escalation of the Cold War. But the fact that such a plan was even conceived, that it made it all the way to the president's desk, should send chills down your spine. Operation Northwoods is a stark reminder that governments are capable of unimaginable deception, that they're willing to go to extraordinary lengths to achieve their objectives, even if it means sacrificing the lives of their own citizens. This wasn't just about Cuba, it was about power, about control. It was about the government's willingness to manipulate its citizens, to play on their fears and prejudices, to achieve its geopolitical goals. It's a sobering thought, one that should make us question everything we're told, especially when it comes to matters of war and peace. The declassification of Operation Northwoods in 1997 sent shockwaves through the nation. It eroded public trust in the government and fueled a wave of conspiracy theories, many of which persist to this day. It's a stark reminder that the truth can be stranger than fiction, and that sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that turn out to be true. Operation Northwoods is a chilling example of how easily the lines between truth and fiction can be blurred, how easily governments can manipulate information and events to serve their own agendas. It's a reminder to be critical thinkers, to question everything, and to never take our freedoms for granted. Analyzing historical events with a critical eye is crucial. It encourages us to consider different perspectives and question official narratives. By doing so, we can uncover hidden truths and better understand the complexities of our world. So, let's keep questioning, keep analyzing, and never stop seeking the truth. And most importantly, let's participate in the democratic process to ensure our government remains accountable and works for the betterment of all. I think I messed up. We've journeyed through some dark chapters of history, uncovering truths that many would rather forget. But these stories, as unsettling as they are, serve as a powerful reminder. Blind trust can be a dangerous thing, especially when it comes to those in power. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, Project MKUltra, Operation Northwoods. These weren't just government blunders. They were deliberate acts of deception, of cruelty, of a disregard for human life that's hard to fathom. But they happened. And they serve as a stark reminder that we must always question, always seek the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. So, the next time you hear about a so-called conspiracy theory, don't be so quick to dismiss it. Do your own research, ask questions, be skeptical, be critical, and most importantly, be vigilant. Because the truth, as we've seen, is often stranger and far more disturbing than fiction. Stay curious, my friends.